Bonjour, which is hello, all my relations. Giganos Ndiginakas. My name is Giganos, John Burrows. I'm the Canada Research Chair in Indigenous Law here at the University of Victoria, and I'm on the Victoria Multifaith Society here in town, and the Indigenous representative and one of the organizers of this event this evening. I'm from the Otter Clan. I'm from the Cape Croker Indian Reserve in Ontario. And I'd like to extend warmest welcome to you this evening. We've had a lot of rain over the last few weeks, but I'm grateful for that rain. I remember when I was working with Robert Clifford in a Wasanich law camp in this area, and they talked about rain being the first ancestor. And so whenever I think about the rain and I am in this territory, I remember all the teachings that then come from their ancestors and the things they had to do to learn how to relate to the rain. I'd like to acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen people on whose territories we're gathered today, and recognize the Esquimalt and Songhees and Wasanich people who have a relationship with these traditional territories that continues to this day. And we're grateful to count many of those folks as our friends. We're mindful of what's happening on the lawn of the legislature today as the Indigenous youth are gathered there. And some of us have been there today, and some of us might return this evening to that support, and we're grateful for the work they're doing. This event is, as I mentioned, been organized by the Victoria Multifaith Society in partnership with the Community Partnership Network, the UVic Multifaith Services, which is this building, beautiful building that we're in here, along with the Equity and Human Rights Office here at the university. And we're going to have a Masters of Ceremonies this evening that's going to take us through the rest of our time together. So I'm going to be able to sit down there and enjoy these events with you. Flossie Baker will be our MC, and she joined the Sierra Club in September as the Climate Justice Organizer. And it's been so nice to get to know her over the past month or so, even bringing part of this idea to our attention. Previously, she was the lead organizer with the Greater Victoria Acting Together, which is an alliance of labor, faith, and community organizations who pledge to put aside their differences and work together to improve the life of their members across the region. Her passion is in supporting different communities, engaging in building a new story about the future that we face. She was born in London, England, and she is grateful to live in East Vancouver on Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh land. And so I will turn the time over to Flossie to lead us through the rest of our events. Welcome, Flossie.
Thank you so much, John, for that beautiful introduction. Hello, everyone. I am delighted to be your MC for this evening. It's been a great pleasure for Sierra Club BC to be partnering with the Victoria Multifaith Society on this evening's programme, and I've very much enjoyed all those phone calls and meetings we've had planning this event. For those who don't know, Sierra Club BC is one of the oldest and largest environmental advocacy organisations in BC. In fact, we celebrated our 50th year last September. As we go into our 51st year, there are three very, very simple but powerful things that we are holding close. The first is that more and more people are becoming more and more anxious and fearful, but also having more resolve in the face of ecological stress. second thing is that we live in a time and a place where there are so many different knowledge traditions and so much wisdom from different places mixing together, and it's an amazing opportunity for us all to learn with and from each other. And the third thing, and we really are holding this close as we move into our 51st year, is that the stories we tell shape how we act. Basically, the stories that we tell shape our reality. It's very easy as we read the climate science to feel overwhelmed. It's very easy to feel scared when we notice the weather patterns shifting, or the flowers blooming earlier than they should, or that there aren't as many butterflies this year. And mornings like this morning, we wake up and we read that the RCMP are raiding Wet'suwet'en land, and we feel sick to our stomach. And it's overwhelming, and it can be very easy to feel the temptation to retreat into our private lives and hide our heads in the sand. And yet, here you all are on this dreary, wet evening, and that makes me believe that there is a part of you that still has faith that our future can be beautiful. And it totally can, because the future is still unwritten. And we have this window, we have this opportunity to be able to create a new, a better story together. One that is woven together with the very best that all our traditions have to offer. And I believe that as that story emerges, we will begin to be more successful at holding decision makers and fossil fuel companies to account. We will be more successful at inspiring more and more people to take action. And I also believe that it will be a story that will inspire us to be braver, more courageous, more kinder people. So I'd like to invite you to see tonight as an invitation to begin to piece together some elements of that new emerging story. Sound good? So we will begin with a keynote from Hannah Askew, who is the Executive Director of Sierra Club. We will then be treated to this wonderful group of panelists who will be giving reflections from their different faith traditions. We will then have a break and move into the back room there to eat some delicious vegetarian food and get into smaller groups for conversation and reflection, and then I'll bring us all back for some sharing at the end. Okay? So, to introduce our keynote speaker this evening. Hannah Askew is the Executive Director of Sierra Club BC. She loves plants, animals, trees, water and rocks, and is passionate about ensuring healthy wild spaces for present and future generations. She is a trained lawyer, and over the last 10 years she has been deeply involved in learning from Indigenous communities about their systems of law and governance. She worked as a researcher on the Anishinaabe and Coast Salish legal orders for the Indigenous Law Research Unit at UVic, and taught as an instructor in the Aboriginal Justice Studies program at the Native Education College. Please join me in welcoming Hannah Askew.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you so much to John for that beautiful welcome and introduction, and to Flossie for starting us off this evening and for being our Master of Ceremonies tonight. And most of all, thank you to all of you for, as Flossie said, coming out on this rainy night, and we know that you have so many places that you could be, and we're so grateful that you're here and that we're able to be together to talk through these really critical and important questions and stories tonight. So for me, it's really a dream to have this gathering and to be able to have this conversation with all of you. I've been involved in environmental work really since I was a little girl. I grew up in Toronto in the 1980s and 90s, and that was when environmental issues were really coming a bit more into the mainstream of people's consciousness in Canadian cities and schools like mine. We had recycling clubs and this sort of thing, and I was very active in those as a child, and as I got older, also sought to look at changing some of the laws and policies and trying to understand why we were facing some of the challenges that we had. And so in my teen years and 20s, I did a lot of activism. But I felt a lack for me in those activist communities that I was part of, and there was a deeper sense of connection, or I think now I understand it as a spiritual dimension that I was looking for, and I started to seek that out in other parts of my life. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about that journey and some of the relationships that has led me to, and some of the teachings that have come to me as a result of that searching that I've been doing for many years now. So to have the opportunity tonight to be in a room full of people who are also trying to put those pieces together, who are concerned about the climate challenges that we're facing and all the different animals and plants and other species that are struggling right now, and who are wanting to consider that challenge and also do that through the lens of our different spiritual and faith traditions, to me is a conversation that I've been wanting to be part of for a really long time. So for me, to be here tonight with all of you to have this conversation is really a dream come true for me, and I'm grateful to the organizers of the Multifaith Society for opening up this invitation for us to partner together and to be able to convene this conversation. So I was really quite nervous in preparing what I would say to you tonight, and one of the main reasons for that is that I didn't grow up myself with any spiritual or faith tradition that was really passed on to me in my family. And so when I was thinking of preparing what I would share with you tonight, I couldn't help the thought from coming into my mind that I would probably be the least qualified person in the room to be sharing something at this podium. I reached out to some of my friends to ask their advice, some of my friends who are deeply rooted in different faith traditions and ways of seeing and understanding the world, and I sought their advice, and the main thing that everyone said to me is, just the important thing is that you be authentic and you be yourself. And so I decided that what I really want to do tonight is share with you my path of seeking to understand things that I see in the world around me, and the work that I'm engaged in right now with Sierra Club BC, and I feel like what I have to share with you tonight is really some fragments, really, of deeper pieces of stories and small glimmers of insight that I've been able to gain, and I don't even know myself yet how they all piece together, but what I'm hoping will come from this is that I'm able to step into a bigger series of conversation with all of you in the room. And I know that at Sierra Club, what we're really hoping for is to be able to draw more people into the conversations and into the problem solving that we're trying to do as a community of practice around the environment right now, because we know that we don't have anywhere near the answers that we need, and we're really depending on more people to step forward with their lived experience and their wisdom that comes from different communities that they're part of and their faith traditions. And so I hope that tonight serves as an invitation for us to connect more around these questions, because we really need your help in the work that we're doing at Sierra Club. And I'm so excited to learn from these panelists later tonight as well. So I wanted to begin with a story that comes from a community that I've been really blessed to spend time in, and that I have a spiritual debt to, an intellectual debt, and also a debt of kindness and love, and that's the community of Nation, which is the community that John comes from. And when I was a law student, I was hired by, I was in Toronto, but I was hired by the University of Victoria to do a project in the community of Nation, which is located on Georgian Bay. And it was a project that was looking at Anishinaabe law and the way that Anishinaabe law has insight into how we can address harms that occur between one another in our communities. And so I traveled there for the first time as a law student, and I had the privilege to work with Lindsay Burrows, who is another law student and also a community member. And we spent this really beautiful and, for me, transformative summer working with teams of elders and knowledge keepers in the community and working on these questions. And one of the individuals that we worked with from the community is a man named Wendell Najwan, who subsequently became a good friend. And Lindsay and I worked really hard through that summer, and we were looking at this question of harm, and that included harms between human beings and the environment. So what happens when water is harmed? What happens when different animals are harmed? What are the responses that the community has to address that? And Lindsay and I did our best to listen to what everyone told us, and we compiled a synthesis at the end of our best understanding of Anishinaabe law on how to address those harms. And we took that synthesis back to the community to share with them and ask for their input on what we had been able to put together. And Wendell Najwan was always very encouraging, said, "This is fantastic." And he said, "But where's the spirituality?" And he felt that he knew we were just beginning in the work, and he wanted to encourage us, but he really felt that he just could not live with a legal synthesis that had left out the spiritual dimension, which for him was the very heart of the law and the heart of the work. And Wendell, even though he was busy running a cafe at the time, he had a family, a lot of responsibilities, but he nonetheless spent the next several months rewriting the synthesis to weave in the spiritual dimensions as he best understood it. And Lindsay and I were so grateful to him for doing that work and for the conversation and the friendship that ended up being generated between us. And and I was so grateful to him too, because I didn't know how to write that in, but I too felt that lack, and I was so grateful for that richness that he added, and that really has been an encouragement for me in my work to dig deeper in that. The other teaching that Wendell gave me that summer is, he said, Wendell's an Anishinaabe man. His father, Wilmer's a residential school survivor, and Wendell's someone who spent his whole life learning and understanding. I think he's in his 50s now. And he said that a lot of students come through the community and have questions and are trying to learn about Anishinaabe ways of doing and understanding things. And he said to me, "But you know what, Hannah?" He said, "I've noticed that often when I ask these students questions back," and these are mostly non-Indigenous students of settler descent like I am, he said, "They often can't tell me who they are. They don't know who their ancestors are. They don't have their own deep rooting of knowledge to share back with me." And he said, "That makes me sad because I'm very curious about them." And from talking more with Wendell, I saw myself, of course, in that reflection, because I felt I had shown up in a very similar way to that. My ancestors come from England and Scotland. I don't know, we lost connection in my immediate family with a lot of our ancestors. My family came here about 3 generations ago. And I realized that I had very little to share back with Wendell. I was asking him these deep questions. And I came to understand that for that relationship to be really healthy and full, I needed to know more about who I was and where I was coming from to be able to step into that conversation. And so I still feel very much at the beginning of the journey, but that question, that reflection from Wendell has led me to examine more my own roots. And I started, and I thought about that when I was preparing for this talk, and I was doing a little bit of research on my last name, Askew, and I discovered that it comes from an old Norse word that means oak woods. And apparently my family on my father's side, comes from Yorkshire, England. And so in the northern region of Yorkshire, there used to be a big wooded oak. And so from what I've been able to find out so far, my family came from that area on my father's side. And when in the Middle Ages people started leaving their place of birth more to seek work, usually the last name that they would give was the place where they came from. So in my case, that was Oakwood. And when I thought that, I thought, how neat that I am now the executive director of an environmental organization that is all about protecting trees and forests. And it felt really good to have made that connection. I didn't grow up, as I mentioned, in any faith tradition. And I started, partly as a result of Wendell's prompting, I began to start asking some questions of my family about about why that was, why did we not have a faith tradition. And it was hard to ask those questions because there was a lot of pain in that part of my family history. And I think I had sensed that from when I was quite young, because I actually, when I was a child, as so many of us do, I had that sense of a spiritual calling, and I would pray or talk to God. I didn't know who God was, and I also knew not to talk about it to my parents because I could sense that there was a hurt there for them, and they had very consciously made a decision not to attend church, but I didn't really know the reasons why. And I started asking my mother about this, and she said that her grandmother had been a member of the Plymouth Brethren, which I still don't know very much about, but when my mother was a child, her grandmother had come to live with her, and her grandmother, I think, was a person who had experienced a lot of hurt in her life, and it manifested in her case in her using her religion to disconnect from the rest of the family, so she wouldn't eat with my mother or her parents, or allow them to listen to music or go to films, and had a view of the world where she saw a lot of danger, a lot of sin in a lot of places. And so for my mother, she experienced that as a really profound disconnection, and it was painful for her, and so she vowed that she would not be part of a faith tradition. And so I feel lucky because I was shielded from that kind of experience. So I was able to develop my own relationship with God and with faith without having that experience of a painful relationship with an organized faith. And I know that so many of us in our communities have had that, and sometimes that's around people's sexual identity or gender or other ways that that people have gotten hurt in faith communities. And so I think that it's really important to bring that recognition into the room. I'm grateful I didn't have that experience, and my parents were able to protect me from that. And so as an adult, well, as a child as well, but then as an adult, I began seeking in my own way to be able to learn from different faith traditions. And so for me, the organized religion that I felt a very strong calling to was Judaism. And I felt that for so many years, and I don't know if it's partly because of my name. People would often ask me, are you Jewish? And I was always a reader as a child. I read a lot of books, and I loved Jewish literature, and the ideas really spoke to me. And it didn't occur to me for a long time that I could become Jewish. For so long, I really admired lawyers, and I also was very drawn to Judaism, and it took me into my 30s to think I could become a Jewish lawyer. So that's, but it was quite a revelation for me when I did begin to think that. So I enrolled in law school in Toronto, and also one day I also just showed up at a synagogue, and I literally didn't know, I really had never been in a synagogue before. I didn't know what I should do, but I just showed up in one day and stayed there for a few years while I was living in Toronto, and began to began to study with the rabbi of that synagogue and learned a lot from her over the few years that I was under her tutelage. I took Hebrew lessons. I still feel, I'm still kind of a baby in terms of learning about Judaism. I didn't grow up in that community. And I was asked to bring forward in this talk some of what I've learned, because I think we didn't have a panelist who was representing the Jewish faith. So I was very nervous, so I called my friend Shafa, who is here in the audience today, and I told him that this talk was upcoming and that I was very nervous about it. And Shafa is a very good friend, and just began to talk with me, and we had these beautiful conversations leading up. And I just want to share one of the insights that he really generously shared with me. And so last week, we had the launch of our new strategic plan for Sierra Club BC, and we were really fortunate to do it in a Coast Salish way. We have 3 Coast Salish women that work with us, and one of them, Charlene George, helped us to organize the launch of our strategic plan in a kind of a big house style with a big house speaker. And Shafa and his wife Nicole, who's also here, were able to attend. And one of the things that we announced with the launch is that as an organization, we are trying to become better listeners. We are trying to reach out to the community. The scale of the challenges that we're facing as in the environmental world right now are so intense that we need everybody's help. We need everybody's knowledge and everyone's experience. And so with our new strategic direction, we are really trying to invite that knowledge and that wisdom in. And part of the reason tonight is so special for us is because we see this as a beginning in that, a chance for us to learn from the Multifaith Society and those of you who are members. And so we made this announcement also to other neighbors and partners that we hope to work with at the launch of our strategic plan. And when I called Shafa the next day to talk about this upcoming talk and to ask for his help, he began by talking about what he had witnessed at the launch of our strategic plan. And he said, I think I really understand what your organization is trying to do by showing up in a new way. And he said, can I tell you, do you know the creation story that comes from the mystic tradition in Judaism? And I said, no, I don't know it. And so I've just learned this story, so you'll have to forgive me. I won't be able to tell it perfectly, but he was explaining that in the creation story, there's a Hebrew word called tzimtzum, which refers to a contraction or a stepping back so that other things can step forward. And so he explained to me that in that creation story, God creates the world by contracting. And because prior to that, God took up all the space. So every part of the world was infused by God, and there wasn't space for us as humans to step in and be part of that act of the creation of the world. And so as an act of generosity, God contracted and to create that space for us. And so when God did that, it created darkness. And then God said, and for those of you who are familiar with the Old Testament, God said, let there be light. And he created these 10 vessels of light that were sent out into the world. But it turned out that those vessels were too fragile to contain the power of that divine light that was in those 10 vessels. And so they broke. They broke and the light scattered. It scattered, and so our task as humans is to gather back all those sparks of light, those sparks of divine light. And when we have achieved that, that's when we will have achieved what in Hebrew is known as tikkun olam, or the restoration of the world, or the healing of the world. And so that story, when Shefa told it to me much more eloquently than I just told it to you, it just really sent shivers down my spine, because I felt that it really helped me to understand the work that I think we are engaged in right now, and the necessity for that work to be work that we do collectively. It's not work that any one group of experts can do by themselves. It's work that has to be done together, and in doing that work, we need to leave space for each other to bring our difference forward. And I think at a time, as Flossie started us out by saying, when we're in a time of stress, it can be the hardest to do that because we're anxious or we're feeling fearful, and it can be the hardest at that time to leave spaces for other ways of knowing and other ways of doing things. And so as a person, myself, and then as an organization, we are really striving to understand how to do that better, because we know that we can't do the work that we need to do by ourselves. I wanted to close my talk tonight by highlighting one particular project that we're involved in at Sierra Club BC. And one of the things that we're doing is, as part of our new direction right now, is we're really trying to understand better how to work. Our office is located on Coast Salish territory, and we're trying to understand better how to learn from Coast Salish law and how to step into a web of respectful relations with all the members of our community, drawing on a Coast Salish understanding that's being shared with us by Charlene George, who's leading this work. She's a member of the Sauk Nation, and also Katie Jin George and Lizzie Thorne, who are also Coast Salish women that are working with us. And we have been involved in a project for the last year, and it's really about how to be in relationship with one another. And so this is actually a painting of a full-scale mural that is actually at an elementary school. It's huge if you go visit it. But what it depicts is it shows the territory that we're on, and it shows all the different beings that we are in relationship with. So fish and water and supernatural beings and different animals. And for me, this work, and so Charlene George is the artist, and we have some bookmarks that we'll share with you later, but you can go onto our website, and this is an interactive art piece also on our website. And so you can click on each one of these beings, and you will get teachings from these beings that are recorded from elders and other Coast Salish knowledge keepers that tell you about the principles of how to be in relationship with these beings according to Coast Salish law. And it's a really powerful piece, and it's also an opportunity for those of us who aren't from this territory to learn how to be in those relationships according to the spiritual and legal obligations that Coast Salish people understand us to have. And in explaining why I think this is so important, some of you may have read, there was in New Zealand, there was a piece of legislation that came through in the last couple of years that granted legal personhood to the Whanganui River. Did anyone here read about that? Okay, I've seen some nodding heads. Yeah, so there's a Maori scholar named Jacinta Ruru who I had the opportunity to talk to about that legislation. She was involved in the creation of that legislation, and she said to me that she thought the most powerful thing about it was that it invited Pakahar, non-Maori people who were living on the territory, to finally enter into the respectful relationship with the river that the Maori had always had. So the Maori had always seen that river as an ancestor, and this legislation and the legal recognition of personhood invites everybody living on that territory to relate in that way. And that really struck me, and I see this as a similar kind of invitation that Charlene and the communities that she worked with have issued to all of us. And so as we think about what we bring from our own faith traditions and our own experiences, I also encourage everyone in the ways that you're able to also learn about the laws from this territory and the spiritual and legal obligations that the people who have lived here since time immemorial understand and may share with us when we are in those respectful relationships. And I think we have to wait to be invited into those relationships, but this is an invitation that has been issued through the artist and her relations in the community that works with. So I wanted to end with that and to invite you all to take one of the bookmarks that shows it and to look at it. So thank you all so much, and I'm really excited to hear from the panel, and I hope that this is just the beginning of a bigger conversation and relationship that we'll be able to have together. So thank you all for listening.
A lot of things in me, and I especially love that idea of dedicating our lives to collecting the scattered light. It's gorgeous. There'll be time to share our reactions to Hannah's talk later, but in the interest of time, I'm going to have to move us swiftly on to hearing from our stellar youth panel. I'm going to introduce them all right now so that they can just flow on from one another. And if you hear a very gentle phone alarm, that's Sheila's phone telling them that their time is up. So, the question that these folks have been asked to reflect on is, what teachings in your spiritual tradition does the world need most right now related to the climate crisis? What teachings in your spiritual tradition does the world need most right now? So first we have Askew Robinson, and she'll be speaking from the Muslim perspective, a Muslim perspective. Askew was born and raised in the Bahamas and has been a settler on Lekwungen land since 2014. Since coming to Victoria, she has been very involved in the UVic Muslim Students Association and the BC Muslim Association. She is in her final year of completing her double biochemistry and chemistry degree here at UVic. Following her, we'll have Brendan Noyes, who will be speaking from an Indigenous perspective. Brendan is a second-year student in the joint degree law program in Canadian and Indigenous law. He is Métis on his maternal side and Icelandic, English, and Scottish settler on his paternal side. He was born and raised in Winnipeg, and his family has ties all through the Interlake and Red River Valley. Then we have Ben Altair Ingham, and he'll be speaking from the Baha'i perspective. For the last several years, Ben has been volunteering at the Baha'i World Centre in the Middle East and is now pursuing a profession in management consulting at UVic. Born in the Cowichan Valley, Ben has lived across the continent and has made an effort to learn from people all over the world. Christopher Sanford Beck will then be speaking from a Christian perspective. Christopher is a second-year creative writing student from Saskatchewan. He grew up in Saskatoon and then was on a small-scale organic farm a couple hours northwest of the city before moving here to Victoria. And finally, Isha Chima will be speaking from a Sikh perspective. Isha is a first-year UVic student from Victoria and a practicing member of the Sikh community. She is an environmental studies major who is very passionate about the current climate crisis and hopes to make an impact to better this problem, either through legislature or social change. We're lucky to have you all with us tonight, so please kick us off.
Good evening, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. For those who don't know, Assalamu alaikum just means me saying peace be upon you, and the response is either wa alaikum assalam or peace be upon me as well. So Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you. I wanted to echo something that Hannah had said about being, a youth basically within your faith. I am as well fully. I was born within the religion of Islam, but what I really like about talks like this is that it allows me an opportunity to really pick apart different parts of what is a complex religion and focus on something that is so beautiful and that I was really happy to learn about my faith. So thank you for inviting me to this panel, those of you who did. So as was said, I'm a Muslim representative, and in Islam, the earth, nature, it's such an important part of our religion, and I was so happy to do this research, and I'm actually going to continue doing this research once this panel is over, but I'll just start with kind of just the main things that I saw were the highlights. So within the Quran, which is our holy book, we have about 114 surahs, which are chapters, let's say. And of those, there are 750 verses that are specific to nature. And of that, there's a lot of chapters that are specific to creatures and to animals themselves. So we have the cow, the bee, the ant, daybreak, the sun, the nighttime. And all of these are chapters or expressions, lines over and over about the importance of each of these. And so it was amazing to read through them and to understand the value of the creatures that we have on this earth. We'll start with water itself. Water is everywhere. Water, ocean, the water that we drink and we consume, the water from the skies that we've been blessed with recently. Water is said about 60 times within the Quran, but it's always referred to as this pure substance. It says in the Quran in Surah 21, and we have made of water every living thing, because we are all composed of water. Everything that we see, everything that we touch, there is water graved within the air around us, has small molecules of water, and it is just, it's the most pure substance, and so it's something to be coveted. It's something to be respected, not wasted. It's not something to be overused. It's not something to be damaged or to be contaminated, whether that's with materials, whether that's with, little kids urinating in pools. It's just something to be coveted as is, and so it's something that is purifying. And so when I pray as a Muslim, the first thing that I do is I cleanse myself, my skin, with water before I prostrate in front of my God. And that's something as Muslims that we do because it's such a pure substance. Earth, dirt. I was so inspired to read just how important earth is, like literal dirt that we take for granted all the time. We step on it, it squishes, it's all muddy out there, it's like overrunning, but earth actually is seen as almost the mother. It's seen as the mother of creation because we were all created from earth in my faith is taught. From earth we were created and to earth we will return, which is why I am a Shia Muslim. There's a Sunni and there's Shia, there are two main denominations, and there's branches below that. But as a Shia Muslim, I pray on a turba, which is like a little stone. You might see people praying on something that's wooden. I actually pray on these wooden beads that I have across my wrist. And the importance of that is just the reverence of understanding the importance of earth to us, of understanding that is where we will all go, and that's where we came from. And so it is, I guess if I tie that, is kind of an ancestor in that way, because that is where we all reside. And something that I've taken to doing is whenever I walk across like a lawn of grass, I find myself saying, sorry with that step, because I'm not sure what I'm stepping on. I'm just kind of like, my friend's like, are you saying sorry to grass? Yes, I am. It happens, it is what it is. So it's something to preserve, it's something to take care of, to nourish, and something that we shouldn't take for granted. Plants themselves are also obviously very coveted things. It's actually highly recommended within our Quran as well as within our faith. So I follow the Ahlul Bayt, and the Ahlul Bayt is like the Prophet's family. So just kind of him and his descendants, and they teach about the importance of plants, and it's actually a sign of worship to plant a tree, to make a plant, to grow, to help that living thing kind of flourish. And it was really amazing to read the lines of that passage about the importance of that and the reverence that we should give to plants themselves. And what I think I've always loved about my faith is how based it is in science as well. And so it spoke a lot to just the fact that this world, every component within this world, whether it be the smallest thing to the largest thing, are all here for a reason. So without the bees, we have a problem. Without the small blades of grass, there is an issue. Without the pebbles, without stones, our world is out of harmony. And so it's the fact that each of these things, whether we can understand material-wise or any-wise, whether we can understand it or not, all of these are important things into the world itself, is keeping this as a balance. And the earth itself is a harmony, there's a natural balance that we don't understand. It changes and it flows, but it's something that's amazing. So, and then I'll just wait for questions.
Marchi. Bonsoir. Brendan Dishnakoshin ni Michif. Red River Valley Duschin, Winnipeg Gi Nati Wakin. Territory Songhis, Piwasquaimal, Piwasanich Wikin. Marci, Grand Marci, we Songhis. Grand Marci, we Esquaimal, Grand Marci, Wasanich. Nimirtin en Nakishkatan. Anush Sidvalar Nandau Unistoten. Jikontan we Pishkewak Aswar. Good evening, everyone. My name is Brendan. I'm Midshif, and as Flossie mentioned, I'm from Winnipeg in the Red River Valley. I'm grateful to be a guest here in the territories of the Songhis, I'm going to bring this up a bit, of the Songhis, the Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples, whose relationship with this land reaches far back into history and continues to this day. It is so nice to meet you all, though I must admit, my heart is heavy today, thinking of those in Unistoten and thinking of my friends and colleagues who are right now at the legislature. I'm very grateful for this opportunity and would like to thank everyone involved in planning tonight's events for including me. And a special thank you to John Burrows, who has been a very kind and gentle mentor as I have been growing. I actually would like to continue the theme. I am a learner in my own faith and spirituality as well. My mother is Jewish. I went to a Catholic school. I grew up knowing that I was Métis, and so I find myself somewhere in the middle trying to sort out for myself the best way to move through the world. And as we're all gathered here tonight, I thought I'd start with a quote from Cynthia Chambers and Narcissus Blood in Love Thy Neighbor, Repatriating Precarious Blackfoot Sites, which I actually read in a book that was gifted to me when I first arrived out here by a Michif colleague of mine. The quote reads, "Whether we are Indigenous or newcomer, today our teepees are held down by the same peg. Neither is going anywhere. And the knowledge and the will needed to protect and save these places no longer belongs to any one people or to any one tradition." So, Métis spirituality is a very complicated and nuanced experience. Different peoples have different backgrounds and relationships, whether it be with Catholicism, Protestantism, or any variety of indigenous spiritual traditions. So I do want to, maybe it's the lawyer in me, caveat by saying that I will be speaking to sort of my very minute experience and perspective. One thing that I did a few months ago as I started working on a paper for a class with Manisha Decca on animals, cultures, and the law was to start to research Michif laws around hunting, actually. I myself had never been out hunting, but it occurred to me that it was an important part of our history that I needed to learn about. And in doing that research, I came across a document shared on the Manitoba Métis Federation website, which is the Hunting Laws 3rd edition, presently updated. And there are two really big principles that come out of that. And so I thought I would speak a little bit to each of those principles today. The first is about conservation. Conservation is always key, and there are a number of reasons that we draw that, and one is that we are in relationship with the land. I believe we are all living creatures interconnected. And I'm going to borrow some words here from Carrie Sloan, a Michif scholar who graduated here from the University of Victoria, and she's speaking to an experience that she had hunting. She is used to this responsibility, to these lands and to these waters. They are part of her. The grasses, the sage, the squirrels, the chickadees and flickers, the rocks with their mecha flashing. The familiar smell of ponderosa pine fills her lungs. She knows the rabbits and the mule deer. She doesn't have to kill them, but they know that. Sometimes they are willing to give themselves to her, and she is always grateful. If a hunt is successful, she talks lovingly to the animal, respecting its body, and she leaves an offering as renewal of the agreement between their families. So when I think about what are things that we can draw from our spiritual traditions and what are things that I can maybe take from my own to share tonight, I think that's one thing that I would really like to key on, is that we are in relationship. In the Michif perspective, food is medicine and medicine is food. And it is Mother Earth that provides us with that food. So we need to make sure that we treat it with respect. The other piece here is that conservation is our top priority. The Michif have developed over time, and based on our peoples and our traditions, a very rigorous and strict set of laws about when to hunt, why to hunt, who to hunt, and everything else that goes with it. And that third principle, along with being Métis comes the right responsibility to our community, our environment, and conservation being at the top, is another really important value to share. One little piece that, just to go at the end here, because I think I'm running out of time, is that we never ever sell anything that is given to us. So, if you'll bear with me as I sort of expand on that, if we are given all of these gifts from the earth, the food, the water, the sky, each other, when we move in ways that commodify, that break those relationships, I think we're moving in the wrong direction. And I think that we need to look to each other and to ourselves in order to find a way through. So I'd like to close by thanking you again for bearing with me. I'm happy to answer any questions and share any of the research, and I look forward to hearing what these other wonderful panelists have, and again, thank you to those who have already spoken.
Hello friends. So I'll be speaking today on the perspective of, seems like it has to go even higher for me, on the perspective of the Baha'i Faith. And it's an independent world religion founded in the 1800s by a person with the title Baha'u'llah, which means glory of God. The principles of the Baha'i Faith center around unity, and we consider all faiths to be different chapters in the same book or different paths to the same sun. We see spirituality from indigenous peoples or Christianity or Judaism as being different perspectives looking at the same universal truth and all converging into one. Now, when we think about unity, the test for any action that we partake in is unity. It's a fundamental organizing principle of the Baha'i Faith. Now, with that being said, there are several tools that can help us achieve that unity. I'm only going to talk about two of these tools briefly today, given the time, and these tools will be consultation and moderation. And then I'll follow that with some thoughts on the relationship between science and religion from a Baha'i perspective. First, we'll look briefly at consultation. The elected council of the Baha'i Faith, the Universal House of Justice, 9 members internationally elected, they have actually written recently a document on climate change. And I'd like to share some thoughts that they have shared with us on how Baha'is might contribute to climate change as is relevant. Specifically on consultation, they say, consultation provides a means by which common understanding can be reached and a collective course of action defined. It involves a free, respectful, dignified, and fair-minded effort on the part of a group of people to exchange views, seek truth, and attempt to reach consensus. An initial difference of opinion is the starting point for examining an issue in order to reach greater understanding and consensus. It should not become a cause of rancor, aversion, or estrangement. By acting in unity, a conclusion about a particular course of action may be tested and revised as necessary through a process of learning. Otherwise, as Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, explains, stubbornness and persistence in one's views will lead ultimately to discord and wrangling, and the truth will remain hidden. Now, looking also at the idea of moderation, there are some quotes that help us dive into these principles of moderation, especially in relation to our perspectives and how we voice our opinions in terms of topics such as climate change. Baha'u'llah says, in all matters, moderation is desirable. If a thing is carried to excess, it will prove a source of evil. Now, this also applies, of course, to the way that our corporations behave, the way that our laws are formed, the way that our governments behave. Human utterance is an essence which aspireth to exert its influence and needeth moderation, Baha'u'llah writes. One word is like unto springtime, causing the tender saplings of the rose garden of knowledge to become verdant and flourishing, while another word is even as deadly poison. He explains, it behooveth the prudent man of wisdom to speak with utmost leniency and forbearance, so that the sweetness of his words may induce everyone to attain that which befitteth man's station. I'll conclude with some brief thoughts on the relationship between science and religion as independent systems of knowledge. Now, of course, science is one system of knowledge if you think of Western academia, but we have to recognize that the systems of science and the systems of knowledge that investigate our material world are many, and there's a plethora, a variety of perspectives throughout the world. Now, the Baha'i faith as a religion takes on the perspective of the spiritual aspects, but really creates a reservation for scientific issues to be handled by scientists and those involved in the scientific community. A Baha'i can be a scientist, but you would not take the teachings of the Baha'i faith and take them directly to mean a scientific truth. The independence of science from religion, but also the coexistence of science from religion, we believe would help us reach a conclusion and hopefully a solution to climate change. Thank you.
Good evening. So I'd like to start out by sharing a short prayer that was written by a Christian Druid in Saskatchewan called the Rune of Sophia. It goes, God is love, and her body is all creation. She is the tree of life, who gathers her children in love. Amen. So when I started thinking about what I wanted to say today, one of the things that occurred to me was that a huge part of Christianity is our belief in incarnation. We believe in God entering the world and becoming a part of it. Often this incarnation is thought of in terms of Jesus Christ, how God became a human person in Jesus of Nazareth. But in reality, God is incarnate in the whole universe, all of creation. You, me, this planet, this solar system, everything is somehow a part of God's body. So when we care for the earth, it's an act of love towards the divine that lives in everything. Now, based on the nature of this event, and that all of you are interested in what we can do in response to the climate crisis, and not everyone is Christian, I won't focus on giving a theologically supported argument for why we should be environmentalists. But instead, I'm interested in looking at what teachings Jesus shared throughout his lifetime that we can apply to our current lives, and especially the way we approach climate justice and the care of the environment. So I think that one of the most important aspects in this discourse around environmentalism and what we can do to protect our planet is the idea of radical love. And this might sound kind of wishy-washy. You can't just love your way to lower CO2 emissions or divestments from extractive fossil fuel industries in UVic. But we can try, that's right. Radical transforming love is an important foundation for these pragmatic goals that will protect creation from destruction that we humans inflict upon it. A deep-rooted love of the earth is a very strong starting point for ecological justice. So like many world religions, love is at the center of Christianity. We believe that the universe was created through God's love. It was God's love for us that caused God to become incarnate in Jesus Christ. And all throughout Jesus' ministry in first century Palestine, he spread news of God's love, reassuring people that there was a divine presence that cared for them, and reminding people to love each other. However, radical love doesn't just mean being nice or trying not to stir the pot. Sometimes anger is a part of radical love. It doesn't mean turning a blind eye to the wrongs carried out by individuals or corporations or policymakers, and especially when we are faced with a crisis of the magnitude that we see today, radical love means taking action. While Jesus was carrying out his ministry, a huge factor of his mission was interrupting the established social order, subverting unjust systems of being. He was an itinerant troublemaker who did things differently than the way people were used to. He shared meals with sex workers and those in pay of the imperial forces. All throughout the New Testament, we are told stories of the ways that Jesus went against the status quo, and including stories on a very concrete level, like when he flipped the tables of the moneylenders in the temple. So when it comes to the climate crisis that we're faced with, I think it's clear to all of us that the status quo has to be interrupted. We can't keep going on as we are now. It's going to take some table flipping to solve this problem. It's too easy to sit back and allow ourselves to rest easy with what we currently have. But we know that if we do nothing, if we do not show our love for creation and for our fellow living beings and for ourselves, we are sure to end in destruction. As I see it, Christianity can offer both spiritual and practical guidance when it comes to facing up to the climate crisis. Knowing that God's body is all of creation, we can love bravely and radically with the intent to transform. And the stories that we hear about Jesus remind us that in order to face a challenge, it is necessary to step out of the ordinary and into radical love. And sometimes this means flipping tables. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Just to start off, I'll start with saying Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. It's just a good way to welcome and start off. I did that to myself, sorry. So to kind of just start, a really big, unique, and a difference from other religions is that in Sikhism we don't have a creation story, but throughout our scripture there is a lot of mentioning of creation. So a key principle of Sikhism is respect and kindness, inequality, and I think this is something that's very, very prevalent in the environment. So when we view things from God, although we don't have a creation story, we do believe that God has created everything for us out of love, and thus we must respect it. So for example, Sikhs who do commit to a higher level of religious dedication called Amrit, they will keep their hair long, they won't eat meat, they'll pray, they'll shower every day. But Sikhs who don't commit to that or are just at the beginning parts of their religion or are born into the religion, there still is that sense of respecting your resources and being mindful of other creatures in this planet. There's a lot of references to the environment within our scripture called the Guru Granth Sahib. So when we view that scripture, we actually view it as our 11th Guru, meaning our 11th teacher. So in that sense, the word Sikhism comes from the religion's original name being Sikhi, and that means to learn. And we are the students of our gurus, which are our teachers. So God is our teacher, and we are the students. So to establish that sort of respect towards God, we also have to be very mindful of the environment, which is where I see that kind of being a factor that could help with the topic at hand. Sorry, I talk with my hands a lot. I don't know why it's a bad habit. So for that, it would be being mindful, not using resources without actually respecting them. Don't overly consume resources. Be respectful of animals. So within Sikhism, you're not supposed to harm other people, including animals or nature. There's a lot of mention of being peaceful and promoting peace and promoting justice. So a really big principle of Sikhism is justice. And I believe through climate action, that is a sense of justice. Because if you do see the people being affected by climate change, it is also people in third world countries. It affects people who are in lower income, people who are suffering from poverty. It affects them the most. So providing that sense of justice is super duper important within the religion, which is also why I'm very interested in environmental studies, because it's a good way to kind of connect two interests. But yeah, behind that sense of respecting God and respecting everything that God has given us is a big thing. It's a big factor. I'm just going to end it there, seeing as I'm pretty sure I'm reaching my time.
Wow. Thank you so much, all of you, for being willing to share what you did tonight and to putting so much thought and work into preparing what you were going to say. That was so rich, and I would have loved to have listened to you all speak all evening.